Drakahl. Drakahl is primarily the only melee fighter that exists currently in the Crucible. In the meta that exists is mobility. If you're looking at the map in the Crucible, the map is actually quite big. Unfortunately, a lot of the gameplay revolves around capping different points. Like for example, one of these stations, you can cap them, and you're either going to get more essence, you're going to gain better shielding, you're going to get shielding, you're going to get more orbs. Some of the things that you can cap revolve around more damage or higher HP, etc. So since that requires mobility, and that's something that Drakahl lacks because he has a really long cooldown on his left shift, which is primarily his mobility. Now you can take a perk in the very beginning at level 1 that gives you second wind, but the problem is that everybody seems to have a much better version of dash than him. Shift. Like I said, you can take the perk in the very beginning at level 1, second wind, that reduces the CD by 1 second for every chop, for every land of your left click. You can reduce it by 1. But the problem is that then after that, you still have to eat a 12-second CD, and most people, like Sazan, she only has I think like a 3 or a 4-second on her dash ability, and it's almost the same range as Drakahl's. The other thing is that she also has more mobility when she switches over to her shotgun. She gets a little bit more mobility. She gets passives for more blinks. Same thing with like characters like Summer. Like Summer can literally traverse this entire thing. She can traverse from here to the other side of the map within 2, but the ability to utilize attacks and skills and still remaining highly mobile compared to somebody like Drakahl, who just lacks a lot of mobility. The other thing is that talking about Drakahl, what I would like to see on his right click, right? The right click does like this little, looks like he's actually throwing his axe. It's supposed to be, I think, like a bullet or something that comes out of his axe. What I would like to see would be 2 changes. Either a passive in the skill tree, or make it the base where instead of dealing damage, it roots his target, right? So that gives you like maybe like a 1 or a 1.5 second root. And of course, it requires you to aim because it's not very forgiving, right? You can be like right here, you'll do damage, and then off to the side, and then you'll completely miss. The other thing is that I would like to see some changes for like the spin to win, and of course his lack of innate healing is the other problem with Drakahl. Just taking a look at how unforgiving his right click is. It does have a 3-second cooldown, right? So if you're right on point, it's obviously going to hit, right? But if you're off slightly to the side, it'll do completely, it'll completely miss. And of course, so it's easily strafed. If someone is just strafing back and forth, it's real easy for this ability to miss, especially with characters that have the ability to dash, because it has, it's rather slow. So it gives most characters the time to dodge roll or, dash out of the way, especially characters like who have high mobility. For example, like Summer or Sazan, who has a lot of mobility, or Mendoza, who just has base, sprint with their left shift. They can literally keep that up the whole time. So one thing that I would like to see changed on him to make him much more viable in the current meta, because I know people play him, but he's not really all that viable because one, you're just gonna get gunned down. He doesn't have really good healing, doesn't have any like innate base HP regen, which would be pretty good for him. He does have a little bit of damage reduction in his level 2, but it just basically turns 25% of the incoming damage to damage over time, which you can kind of mitigate once you hit level 4 with your pot. But then again, like I said, he has problems with mobility, so kind of trying to get away and utilize a healing med pack just leaves you basically like a huge pinata, especially because he has a huge hitbox. So what I would like to see with him change is a change to his right click, where it offers maybe like a 1 second or a 1.5 second root. So you would root the target, and then you would use your left shift to, in essence, pin the target, right? So if the target was, your left shift would act as a gap closer, but it would also act as a knockback. So you basically shoulder charge the person and you knock the person back, whatever X amount of meters, right? But if you use that ability and you hit the person up against a wall, it then stunned the person. So you have access to like a little bit of a root, and that would basically be your combo, so you can take more advantage of second wind to stay mobile on the battlefield. Because currently you can utilize second wind to have access to a little bit more mobility, but then you miss out on other things like the 15% extra damage that you could take. There's quite a other options that you could take from his level 1 to make him more viable. So actually having that little bit of combo will then make it more viable. You can actually sit there and get a couple left clicks in and make that passive all the more useful. The other thing with Drakahl is that his E into the stun has a huge wind up, and it just leaves you exposed, right? That is a huge amount of time where you can get focused, especially if you're getting focused by multiple people and you kind of want to go in and CC the person. Maybe they're not paying attention to you. You can come in into a weak and then immediately kind of wind up. That easily gets dashed, right? Because so many people just have better mobility that they see Drakahl utilizing that ability and they can just easily move out of the way. And the other thing is that you typically end up burning 2 different cooldowns. One, your 12-second cooldown, and then you have another, I think it's 12 seconds on your E. So you do gap close, go into E, and then immediately wind down, and you just literally wasted 2 12-second cooldowns, and you still haven't really dealt that much damage. And then now you're stuck in the fight because there's nothing you can do after that. You have no extra mobility, which is why I would like to see his Q into the grab, right? The grab having a shorter cooldown than perhaps the other ability. So you can leave his Q into slash as whatever 8 seconds. It's currently too long. It's 12 seconds. Currently way too long, and it really doesn't give him a lot of healing, especially because he's a melee brawler. He doesn't have access to the mobility to kind of go into the fight and then exit the fight if he's getting overwhelmed. Especially in team fights, he easily gets focused where the team can fall back. And like a character like Sazan has dashes as well as haste whenever she switches over to her shotgun, as well as having the ability to go invisible when she switches over to her knife. So it gives her a lot of ability to disengage. Same thing with Summer. Summer has her knockback. She also has her left shift that will cause her to basically dash forward, very similar to what Drakahl does. But Drakahl has much longer cooldowns. And so one thing that I would like to see also with his E into left click would be kind of like in old school Guild Wars when you played in like a warrior build. It kind of made like a path, like it showed like a little direction where you were going to go, and then it pushed and propelled your character forward. And so that would be pretty cool to see, so that it kind of pushes you all the way forward. Currently you have to hold onto your left click. It just doesn't naturally push you forward, and of course it still has a bit of a long cooldown. So for example, like if you hit, for every person that you hit, it reduces the cooldown by 1, which would give him a little bit more mobility, and then you can utilize this ability also to disengage as well. Right, if you're not holding anything, he doesn't move, right? So you have to hold down W for him to move, and it has quite a little bit of a long cooldown. So you can actually, maybe if you were trying to disengage, you wanted to deal damage, you can just do this. It would push you, propel you forward, and then you could utilize that, and now you can get away, right? And then if someone was chasing you, right, you can use that. Now you've rooted, and you've got a little bit of mobility. The other thing that I would like to see is perhaps changing his Q into slash to something that he can utilize when he's not in combat, because that only is useful when he's in combat, and it's very useless when he's out of combat and he kind of lacks healing. He lacks healing, and he's prone to taking a large amount of damage, and of course getting focused. So if he had something that he utilized, I don't know, make him eat a bug or something, and it heals for maybe half of what he would do if he actually swiped or something, some sort of innate healing, make it a longer cooldown, something so that it makes him a little bit more viable. I would not do all of these things at the same time. I would probably utilize first his like I said, the root right into the dash forward for the CC, for the knockback, right? So it becomes a little bit more skillful. If you're fighting up against like another melee build and they're pressing like one of your teammates, you can utilize the knockback to kind of displace them and push them out of the way. Or if you're fighting and you see somebody coming, you can basically root them as they're coming through, and then pin them against the wall and then CC them. These are just kind of some of the changes that I like to see with Drakahl. I find him to be very lacking, of course, and I would want all characters to kind of have the same relevancy within the current meta. And since the meta is primarily revolves around mobility, the biggest thing that Drakahl needs in terms of buffing him is more mobility.